I think we set the stage to carry on further conversations. You know, we only have 15 days really to go. We've got to find a way that we can curb our spending, raise our debt limit, and also grow our economy. And the president agreed to appoint a couple people from his administration to sit down and negotiate directly with my team, so I found that to be productive personally. But we've got a lot of work to do in a short amount of time. Now, I wish we had been able to be in this place 100 days ago. This is what we requested, but we are where we are, so we will work hard to make sure to try to have this to come to fruition.
When will you meet again? You take default off the table?
Well, the great thing about that question is we've already have taken default off the table because the House Republicans passed a bill that raised the debt ceiling, limited our future spending, saved taxpayers money by being able to pull back unspent money and waste, and actually grow our economy by making our economy stronger and lifting people out of poverty into work. And so those are the parameters we'll talk about. Let me give a moment to have Leader McConnell say a few words.
Let me just say what I've said since February. The President and the Speaker are the keys to the deal. I'm prepared to try to deliver as much of my conference as I can for whatever the Speaker and the President can agree to that we know will get a signature.
Mr. Speaker, when will you meet again?
Oh, it's a no-brainer. I don't think anybody in America doesn't think if you had billions of dollars sitting out there that you appropriated 2 years ago, people could not spend, and it's hardworking taxpayers' money, and the pandemic is over, you can't bring it back. It's the only place in Washington that Democrats think you shouldn't do that, but I think at the end of the day it will be in the bill.
Mr. Speaker, when will you meet again?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I am too. You know, the difficult part here is I came February 1st to sit down with the president so we wouldn't be at this day. So how could we responsibly lift the debt ceiling? Our spending is out of control. That $6 trillion extra dollars the Democrats spent brought us inflation. How can we grow our economy and make us less dependent on China and actually work together? Unfortunately, for all those thinking that, for 97 days, the president ignored us and said we couldn't meet. It wasn't until the Republicans would no longer ignore the problem and actually raise the debt ceiling, pass a bill, did we finally get a meeting. It's unfortunate we are where we are, but the good thing about it is Republicans always look to find a solution.
Mr. Speaker, you said earlier this week that you were still very far apart.
We are.
We're still very far apart at this point.
Yes.
What progress was made in this meeting? And you wanted to see a deal by the end of the week.
Yes.
When do you think a deal could be possible?
It is possible to get a deal by the end of the week. It's not that difficult to get to an agreement. When you think about Limit, Save, Grow, the bill we passed, we raised the debt ceiling. We cap future spendings. We grow our spending in Congress by 1% each year. That gives you trillions of dollars of savings. We bring back money that we have already appropriated from the taxpayer that wasn't spent in a pandemic. We put in work requirements that the president voted for as a senator that in Wisconsin just a couple months ago passed by 82%. It lifts people out of poverty, put them into jobs. What that does is helps our supply chain. So no longer do we borrow money from China to pay people not to work. And the only thing we're talking about are able-bodied people with no dependents. That's all you're talking about. It's already in place in certain areas. And so then we make ourselves more energy independent. We change the red tape that we can actually build things in America. So the roads we want to build, the energy projects we want to build to become energy independent. So it lowers the price to Americans, but at the same time creates more jobs and the economy gets stronger.
Are you closer to getting a deal? I would think this opportunity to ask you, why this Congress is not putting any pressure on the Lebanese political class to elect the president? I'm taking this opportunity to get this for you.
All right, come back to me when we're not talking about the debt ceiling.
With this situation still unresolved, the president, as you know, is about to head overseas for the G7. Should he stay put and not go?
Look, the president is the president of the United States. He can make his decisions of what's best and how to use it. The president has now, what has changed in this meeting is the president changed the scope of who's all negotiating. Instead of all the four leaders, it's really he's finally taking Leader McConnell's advice that he's applied to him. The same advice you gave to President Trump that it worked out, same advice to President Obama and others. Appoint somebody from the president's team who can work with the speaker's team to see if we could come to an agreement. That is what the decision was made in this meeting. So the structure of how we negotiate has improved. So it now gives you a better opportunity. Even though we only have a few days to get it done, had we done this back 97 days ago, we'd already have a bill passed. Yes, ma'am.
The White House keeps slamming Republicans for cuts to veterans benefits. My understanding is the Appropriations Committee rolled out funding that is $18 billion above fiscal year 2023 levels. Can you confirm that, and then also talk about whether the White House is negotiating in good faith, and when's your next meeting going to be?
Look, great question. As you really know, is for many times the White House and the President would say Republicans are going to cut the veterans. We would say that was a lie. Today, out of appropriations, it was proven it was a lie. We actually increased spending for our veterans. It's like any other household. You prioritize where you spend your money. The real question is, how much debt is too much? We're at $32 trillion almost. 120% of our GDP. That means it's larger than our economy by 20%. This is the equivalent of your child having a credit card and they hit the limit again and again and again. And every year when your child hits the limit, all you do is increase the limit. Well, it comes to a point now that you can't afford it. So do you just increase the limit again, or do you actually take a serious thought of where you're spending your money? You're still going to fund the things that are most important to you, but you're going to eliminate the waste. Maybe you don't go to Starbucks every single day. Maybe you don't waste the money there. The president just now appointed individuals. We will set, I would like to meet today actually, and just start meeting until we get this done. Yes, sir. Well, that's all up for negotiation. Inside the Republican bill, we lifted it for $1.5 trillion. I mean, when you think about it, the spending has gotten so far out of control, we already borrowed $1 trillion this year. And think about what that means to the average American. We are borrowing money, we are borrowing your future for things that are being wasted upon today. For more than $1 trillion, that means China is funding this. We need to change that behavior and make America stronger, less dependent on China, and actually curb inflation. Yes, sir. You know, look, if this is where we were in February when I first came down, I'd be very optimistic that this would get solved right away. The structure has changed, so we're in a better process. Mitch, you want to say anything else?
Well, let me. 7 of the last 10 debt ceilings have carried something else. What the Speaker and I are advocating here is not unusual. It's more common than not. A perfect example of it is the Congressional Review Acts that we've been voting on periodically in Congress to overturn was done on a debt ceiling during the Clinton administration. So this shouldn't be this hard. Number one, we know we're not going to default. They know it, we know it. We're running out of time. And just finally, as the speakers pointed out, the president's agreed to designate somebody to be the lead, as I recommended to President Trump in 2019 when we faced the same situation. Do you think he wanted to negotiate with Speaker Pelosi? Of course not. I said, you have no choice.
We understand that Mr. Biden's cutting short his trip. Did you put pressure on him to do that?
Yes, ma'am.
Pressure on the president?
Go right ahead.
Can you talk about your discussions during the meeting on the work requirements? Are you just discussing TANF changes now, or is Medicaid and SNAP requirements still on the table?
Look, I'm not going to negotiate with all of you. We know where we need to get to. We know what bill we have passed. Look, the way the founders have developed this country, which is an unbelievable country, you lend your voice to your elected officials. The House passes a bill, the Senate passes a bill, and then you go to conference. Unfortunately, the House is the only body that has passed a bill and raised the debt limit. We are now 15 days away from hitting this limit. Republicans didn't sit back and wait till Janet Yellen told us when the deadline was. We passed it long before she ever said June 1st was coming, because we didn't want to put America into jeopardy like this. And so we have worked to try to solve problems. Just as you looked at Title 42 being lifted on the border, we didn't ignore the problem like the White House. We actually put a border control bill out there so we can secure our borders. And what happened this weekend? A person on the terrorist watch list from Afghanistan was just coming across this border. Why? You know, we caught more people in the month of February on the terrorist watch list than we caught the entire time of the last administration. You can't keep ignoring problems. You got to find solutions. And that's what the Republicans in the House have done. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. What do you tell the world who is looking at you now and concerned about possible default and the implications in the global economy?
Look, I think America's the #1 economy in the world, and when we get done with this negotiations, America's economy is going to be stronger because we're going to make the American economy stronger by putting more people back to work, lifting them out of poverty, lowering our energy costs, and more importantly, curving our spending that the runaway. So as the world looks around and look back at America said they were spending too much, they won't be able to say that when we're done. Thank you all very much. Have a good day.
Our staff meeting today?
Don't know for sure.
I did it because I turned it on. I grabbed it.
Heads up, heads up.
Here they come. Senator Schumer, how'd it go in there today?
Look, it was a good and productive meeting. Everyone agreed that default would be the worst outcome, a horrible situation for America and America's families. But we also agreed that we need to pass a bipartisan bill with bipartisan support in both chambers. I asked Speaker McCarthy, does he agree with that? And he said yes. And his bill, of course, is not a bipartisan bill. And so the bottom line is that we all came to agreement that we were going to continue discussions in the way that I believe Speaker McCarthy described, which was agreed to by all of us in the room together. And hopefully we can come to an agreement. We don't have much time, but default is just the worst alternative. And having a bipartisan bill in both chambers is the only way we're going to avoid default. Hakeem and I are committed to trying to get that bipartisan bill done.
It was a positive meeting. I thank the President for once again convening us. It was an open and an honest, but a very cordial discussion. We all agreed that the only path forward is to reach a bipartisan agreement anchored in common ground. We all agreed that default is not an acceptable option and must be avoided. And we all agreed that over the next few weeks, we have to proceed with the fierce urgency of now in order to make sure we can reach that bipartisan, common sense, common ground agreement so that we can protect the health, the safety, and the economic well-being of the American people.
Few questions. Yes, yes. Yeah, we're not going to get into negotiations out here. We have to come to common ground. That's the only way this has ever gotten done. It has never gotten done with one party saying you have to do it my way. You have to get both parties in both houses together. Yes.
How do we define a common ground?
Well, you'll know it when you see it, and that what that means is that we'll not sacrifice our values. They'll probably not sacrifice their values, but we'll have to come together on something that can avoid default. Default is a disaster. Full stop. And everyone understood that in the room. I was glad to see that everyone understood what a disaster default was.
Would you say that you're closer to a deal today than you were a week ago? You said it was productive.
Yes, I think it was, as the leader said, it was a much more cordial meeting. There were honest and real discussions about differences that we have on a whole variety of issues. But it was all respectful, and that was a good sign as well. Okay? Do you want to say one thing?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It was. Well, President Biden has done an extraordinary job of bringing us together last week, setting in motion staff discussions that have been positive and productive over the last several days, and then bringing us back together to have another positive discussion with a clear path forward in terms of reaching an agreement, because default is not an option. Everyone agreed that that was the case. A default would be a disaster for the American people. It would trigger a job-killing recession. Default would crash the stock market and hurt the retirement security for millions of older Americans, and a default would dramatically increase costs on people all across the country. And it was a very positive development that everyone agrees. We're going to work with the fierce urgency of now over the next week or two, reach an agreement, avoid a default, and continue our efforts to be there for everyday Americans.
The thing that, you'll give the last question, but one thing I want to say. What gave me the most hope, and there were a bunch of things, is that everyone, including the Speaker, agreed we need to be bipartisan. The idea of having a partisan bill we knew would get us nowhere, and everyone freely admitted that in the room. Last question.
Clarifying something that McCarthy said, he said the president appointed appointees or negotiators. What does that mean? Is it new staff? Are you getting?
No, well,
who are those people?
I'll let the president talk about that, but the bottom line is the bipartisan negotiations that we've had are going to continue, but there'll be a few additional players added to those. Thank you, everybody.